Prabhupada said of Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati, his passing away meant he had gone to serve Krishna in another place. Srila Prabhupada had instructed his disciples regarding the body of the spiritual master in his book, The Nectar of Instruction. Being situated in his original Krishna conscious position, a pure devotee does not identify with the body. Such a devotee should not be seen from a materialistic point of view. Indeed, one should overlook a devotee as having a body born in a low family, a body with a bad complexion, a deformed body, or a diseased or infirm body. According to ordinary vision, such imperfections may seem prominent in the body of a pure devotee, but despite such seeming defects, the body of a pure devotee cannot be polluted. It is exactly like the waters of the Ganges, which sometimes, during the rainy season, are full of bubbles, foam, and mud. The waters of the Ganges do not become polluted. Those who are advanced in spiritual understanding will bathe in the Ganges without considering the condition of the water. Srila Prabhupada ki jai. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. We're reading from the Srimad Bhagavatam. Shishikodatai Marko Shashiki Jai. Fifth Canto, Chapter 15, The Descendants of King Priyavrata, and this is 11. Thank you very much for that. Chidamsi Akamasha Cha Yaja Kaman Chidam Yakamasha Cha Yasha Kaman Duduho Ajahro Ato Balim Nripa Duduho Ajaro Ato Balim Nripa Pratyanchita Yudi Damena Vipra Pratyanchita Yudadamena Vipra Yadashisham Shastam Angsang Paritya Yashisham Shastam Asham Paritya Chidamsya Kamasya Chayasya Kaman Duduha Ajoho Atobalim Nipa Pradyanchita Yudi Damena Vipra Yashisham Shashtam Asham Parecha Chidamsyasya Kamasya Chayasya Kaman Duduha Ajoho Atobalim Nipa Pradyanchata Yudi Damena Vipra Yadashisham Shastam Asam Pradecha Bolo Shadamsiya Kamasya Chayam Shakaman Duduho Ajoho Atobalim Nipa Pradyanchita Yudi Damena Vipra Yadashisham Shastam Asam Paritya Chidamsiya Kamasya Chayasya Kaman Duduho Ajoho Atobalim Nripa Pujanchita yudi dhamena vipra. Yadi shisham shnam asham prajecha. Ladies. Chedam shasya kama shachayasya kaman. Tuduho ajoho ato valim nipa. Pachanchita yudi dhamena vipra. Chidamsi, all the different parts of the Vedas. Akamasha, of one who has no desire for personal sense gratification. Cha, also. Yaja, whose. Kaman, all desirables. Duduhu, yielded. Ajahru, offered. Ato, thus. Balim, presentation. Nipa, all the kings. Pachanchita, being satisfied by his fighting in opposition. Yudi, in the war. Dhamena, by religious principles. Vipra, all the Brahmins. Yada, when. Ashisham, of blessings. Shashtam amsam, 1/6. Parecha, in the next life. Translation. Although King Gaia had no personal desire for sense gratification, all his desires were fulfilled by virtue of his performance of Vedic rituals. All the kings with whom Maharaj Gaia had to fight were forced to fight on religious principles. They were very satisfied with his fighting, and they would present all kinds of gifts to him. Similarly, all the Brahmins in his kingdom were very satisfied with King Gaia's munificent charities. Consequently, the Brahmins contributed 1/6 of their pious activities for King Gaia's benefit in the next life. So responsibly, please. Although King Gaia had no personal desire for sense gratification, all his desires were fulfilled by virtue of his performance of Vedic rituals. All the kings with whom Maharaj Gaia had to fight were forced to fight on religious principles. They were very satisfied with his fighting, and they would present all kinds of gifts to him. Similarly, all the Brahmins in his kingdom were very satisfied with King Gaia's munificent charities. Consequently, the Brahmins contributed 1/6 of their pious activities for King Gaia's benefit in the next life. Prabhupada, Srila Prabhupada ki jai. As a Kshatriya or emperor, Maharaj Gaia sometimes had to fight with subordinate kings to maintain his government. But the subordinate kings were not dissatisfied with him because they knew that he fought for religious principles. Consequently, they accepted their subordination and offered all kinds of gifts to him. Similarly, the Brahmins who performed Vedic rituals were so satisfied with the king that they very readily agreed to part with 1/6 of their pious activities for his benefit in the next life. Thus, the Brahmins and Kshatriyas were all satisfied with Maharaj Gaia because of his proper administration. In other words, Maharaj Gaia satisfied the Kshatriya kings by his fighting and satisfied the Brahmins by his charities. The Vaishyas were also encouraged by kind words and affectionate dealings, and due to Maharaj Gaia's constant sacrifices, the Shudras were satisfied by sumptuous food and charity. In this way, Maharaj Kai kept all the citizens very satisfied. When Brahmins and saintly persons are honored, they part with their pious activities, giving them to those who honor them and render them service. Therefore, as stated in Bhagavad Gita 4.3.4, Tadvadi pranipate pariprashnana sevaya. One should try to approach a spiritual master submissively and render service unto him. Om Agana Timiranda Shagalanjana Shalakaya Chaksharan Malitam Jena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha Jaya Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhupada Shri Advaita Gadadha Shri Vasadi Gaura Bhaktarinda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare. So we're hearing here about the character of King Gaia, and also how he conducted himself in such a way that was pleasing to all the different sections in the Varnashram system. There's 4 basic sections in the Varnashram system, or the Vedic ancient culture of India, and that is the Brahmin, who is the priest, the Kshatriya, who is the king, the warrior, not the warrior, the warrior, and then there's the Vaishya, who's the businessman, and there's the Shudra, and that's the working class. So the Shudra is the predominant part of the population, and the Shudras are protected. If the administration is good, they're given sufficient facility so that they can eat nicely and clothe nicely and live in good accommodation. And the Vaishyas are also pleased because they're allowed to make money and distribute the money. So everything works very nicely, very harmoniously. And even if you try to break that system down, still you'll get some people. If you give everybody tomorrow in Great Britain £1 million, then and come back in a few weeks, then quite a lot of them will have got themselves into very seriously difficult situations, maybe not even be alive. And a few will have invested, some will have distributed kindly. And so in this way, the nature of a person will reassert itself, and those 4 basic natures are there in society. That's why with their children in the ancient culture of the East, they would have the child's chart read according to the time that the child was born. The constellation of the stars would indicate the nature of the child, and then the child could be trained accordingly, rather than forcing a child to behave in this way, which wasn't the child's nature. So it's important that we understand what our nature is, and then how we fit into society, how we can use our talents and our inclinations in a way which is beneficial for everybody. So 1/6 of the pious activities were given to King Gaia because he satisfied the Brahmins. So that's the nature of responsibility. If you want to take up leadership, and it's not going around, it's not bossing everyone around. Okay, you do this, you do that. Here's a cloth, wipe that over there. You do this. It's actually quite a headache to engage people, to keep them engaged, and if people come to you, it can be very, very. I can imagine. I mean, yesterday it was very confusing. There was only a few devotees. If there had been 50 devotees, and I had to try and engage, keep 50 devotees busy, and then monitor it to make sure that they were all busy, then it would have been a real. Would have been easier to have just been told, okay, just dig a hole over there, or whatever, But to have to organize everybody and make sure everyone's engaged is much more difficult. So people may be attracted to the idea of leadership, and they may fall into the temptation of just using that position to exploit, to look after themselves. But then they won't get the real benefit. Like here, they're getting King Gaia is getting 1/6 of the, which is a lot. If you have a lot of Brahmins and you get 1/6, then it's like getting like being a Brahmin thousands of times over, on top of what you're doing already. So that's a very auspicious situation to be in. But if you're not, if everyone's displeased with you and it's all disorganized and chaotic, then you get 1/6 of all the karma, all the bad reaction, which is quite a lot. If you have a lot of people doing a lot of bad things, then you get a lot of, it's a heavy weight that you carry. So unfortunately, we're not so aware, I think, in today's world of the weight of responsibility that comes with leadership positions. And it should be entered into very cautiously and with great consideration of everybody that needs to be engaged and looked after nicely and progressively. So Maharaj Gaya is satisfied. And it's interesting because the kings were satisfied. And it reminds me of a story, you may have heard the story already, of King Indradyumna. Indradyumna Maharaj. Just recently has been doing a series of talks about the Govindaji deity. And during the course of it, one story came up of a king. And the king was being attacked by an opposing king, to his brother actually. And they came dashing into the king's quarters and said, Maharaj, we're under attack. Rally the soldiers, quick. And the king said, I have to do my puja first. Don't do anything before I do my puja. And they were saying, but Maharaj, never mind, but Maharaj, pass me the incense. And so he did his puja and chanted his japa and did his morning program. And then he came out onto the battlefield and there's nobody there. And he says, oh, what happened, And they said they were completely defeated. Somebody came running out on a horse, and he was amazing. He fought. It was unbelievable. He fought so well. He drove all the soldiers away. They were completely routed, and then he went for your brother, and your brother was soundly defeated. Then the next minute, his brother turns up, and he says, I don't know who that was, who I've just been fighting with, but he was amazing. I think it must be your Krishna. So I surrender. I want to become a devotee myself. So it's interesting that the kings of ancient yore had the culture to be able to appreciate the prowess of another king to the point where it's like, okay, I'm soundly defeated, all respects. That was an amazing display. Here's some gifts, and you're the boss. Okay, they had the decency to appreciate that, to recognize that. So that again, at that point's coming up here as well, that Maharaj Gaya fought so well. And because he didn't fight outside of religious principles, then, he didn't do any skullduggery or use any cheating methods. Like the way war is now, it's such a cheating thing, the way the war is. It's not fair. They have this bomb, which is not even, it's an illegal weapon, as a lot of the weapons are. And you drop the bomb at night, it's magnesium, and it drops like a big ball of light. It doesn't make any noise, and it just spreads out this gas. And it reacts with anything that's got water in it. And then the next day, they show you this town in Fallujah, and it's just a town of skeletons. They've got clothes on. There's one skeleton with a little skeleton in its arms, fully clothed. And the gas has gone in and melted all the skin, women, children, old, young. That's not actually proper war, according to proper principles. It's actually, and because of that, then there is no respect on either side. Everybody has a vendetta, and they'll do anything to even up for the way they've been treated, and then this goes on and on and on, generation after generation. So that's what we see, unfortunately. But the ideal standard was the king would fight properly on religious principles, and when the other side was defeated, then they would accept it and honor the king for his prowess. Any questions or comments?
Does it mean like if Maharaj Gaya was approached by some other king to fight on, say, irreligious principles, or if some other king was behaving or acting irreligiously, would Maharaj Gaya fight in that instance?
Well, here it's indicating that the kings had the piety to be able to appreciate. It may be that some kings that opposed a king that was fighting on religious principles weren't fighting on religious principles. They may be fighting because they want to gain the wealth and the prestige. So that may be them. But that's the whole point of fighting on religious principles, is that you won't give up those principles. And Krishna explains in the Gita that I am of morality, I am victory. So if you follow your principles, then you've won, whether you're defeated or not. In that sense. So, but it's also the implication is there that if you are fighting according to the proper principles, then Krishna will help. Krishna will assist you. And if you're not, if you give up your religious principles and fight, then you're not protected any longer by Krishna, you see. So that's the challenge with us, as well as that. Do we stick to our values? We may read so many things in the books and agree with it philosophically and intellectually, but do we put it into practice? Do we actually practice it? Krishna encourages Arjuna to fight also, and he says to avoid fighting would be irreligious. So fighting for the right reasons, fighting to protect the religious principles and to secure good leadership for the welfare of the citizens. There are certain times when it is good to do that, and not to and this idea of being non-violent and passive is not appropriate in those circumstances.
In today's world, what sort of fight would it be, fighting on religious principles?
Well, it would still be using arrows and swords and weapons, but it explains in the Mahabharata that if a soldier lost his weapons during the fight, then the opposing opponent would have to give up his weapons also. So if he broke his bow, they would shoot the bowstring and disarm him of his bow. Then they would throw their bow away, and then they would go up and they would engage with swords, or if the swords became broken, then they would just engage in unarmed combat. So that was considered fighting on religious principles. Of course, if the other person isn't doing that, if you lose your bow and he carries on using his bow and fights against you, or if he fights you and it's unfair because he's more qualified than you are, has more, because there's different types of warriors, isn't it? Some can fight with 1,000 soldiers. A Maharati can fight with 10,000 soldiers. And then they say actually in the beginning of the Mahabharata they were following all the rules. And as it went on, as the battle went on over those 18 days, all the rules were getting broken. And then even when the sun was setting, they carried on fighting. So in the end, it just broke down into chaos. And that was then, when they were trained. And even then we see how eventually everything was cast to the wind. And it just became a free-for-all. They were fighting anyone at any time with any weapon.
Yes, kind of this non-violence is a bit of a sentimental idea, because you can see in some countries where government is weak and the police is weak, they get bribed, it's just completely wild. The rest is dangerous to go on the street,
Yeah.
to kind of stay late at night, you can get robbed at any moment. Why in some countries it's not like that? Because there is, police department, and there is, army or whatever that keep the peace.
Yeah. Yeah, that's a big subject as well. And it's interesting because Bhagavad Gita was used by some political leaders as a book to promote peace. And Srila Prabhupada would say, well, it was spoken on the battlefield just before a huge massacre of soldiers took place. So how can it be about peace?
Then on the other hand, some other political leaders, they use scriptures to promote war. That's also not right.
Yeah. That's one of the main reasons people say, I don't believe in religion, it's caused so many wars.
As practicing Krishna conscious devotees in today's world, are we supposed to do any sort of fight on religious principles or Krishna conscious principles? If so, what sort of fight would that be?
Well, Lord Chaitanya is the most recent incarnation, avatar in our line, so we follow. So whatever Lord Chaitanya says, that's the most updated application of the scriptures. And Lord Chaitanya said it because Lord Nityananda said he was going to kill Jagai and Madai, well, especially Madai he was going to kill. He had a Sudarshan chakra and it was spinning, and Lord Nityananda said, if you kill Madai, you have to kill everyone, because everyone is like Madai in Kali Yuga. So then Lord Chaitanya didn't kill him, he just killed the ignorance. So our weapons are not bombs, but books. And we drop the books into the laps of the conditioned souls. And because they're time bombs, then they don't necessarily explode there and then. They go on the bookshelf and they're ticking away. Tick, tick, tick. And then suddenly, what's this all about? And then it goes off. So that's our weapon. Our weapon is knowledge. And the real enemy is ignorance. Shishikonitai Maya Pashashi Ki Jai. And because that avidya dwells within us, then Rupa Goswami is saying carefully and daily, it is wonderful that simply by carefully chanting these sweet names every day, a natural relish awakens within the tongue. And mula hantri is to destroy, and mula is the root of material existence. So mula hantri. So the real enemy is the root of material existence and attachment. And the real weapon is the holy name. Krishna Nama Charitadi Sitapya Vidya. Sita is sweet. The names are very sweet. And if you chant them every day, a natural relish will awaken within your tongue, and then your disease will be destroyed at the root. So you should understand that that's the real enemy, because Prahlad Maharaj didn't see anyone as his enemy, because he'd made his mind his friend. So our real enemy is our mind. And if we make the mind our friend, then everyone's our friend. Whether other people agree with that or not, it's up to them. But for us, we are proactively friendly with everybody. And people may have all their reasons, justifications for why they want to be negative or resentful or bitter towards others, all their justifications. But they say that resentment is like, it destroys the vessel that it's carried in. So you do harm to yourself by carrying the resentment and the hatred inside your own heart. So you're the one that becomes damaged by that. Although you may be thinking, well, if I carry this ill intent towards somebody else, it'll be them that'll eventually suffer. But it's actually you that will suffer. It's not what happens to you that hurts you, it's how you react to what happens to you that hurts you. Because you always have the choice how you want to react. You can't say, well, I was okay, until he did this. It's not my fault, it's his fault. If he'd have behaved in this way, I would have been fine. But you can't blame anybody else for how you react to things. That's entirely up to you. It's your choice. Isn't it?
Chaitanya Mahaprabhu is the latest incarnation of Krishna, and he has given us the updated teachings.
Yeah.
So, what is the update in the teachings from Bhagavad Gita to teachings 5,000 years back when Krishna came and gave us the teachings of Bhagavad Gita to 500 years back when Mahaprabhu came and his teachings? What is the update?
Well, that update covers 17 volumes of books. So basically, the essence of those 17 volumes of books is that in a humble state of mind, and in being more tolerant than a tree, and being devoid of all false prestige, and being ready to offer all respect to others. That's the essential update on the teachings of the Bhagavatam. And it's interesting that he talks about state of mind, because sometimes there's a bit of devotees say, well, it's not. You should just hear the holy name. Don't worry about how you feel or what you're thinking or the mood or the prayer. Just get into, just chant it and hear it. But Lord Chaitanya is saying the state of mind. In this way, you can chant the holy name. In this state of mind, you can chant the holy name constantly. So it's very much, Lord Chaitanya is very much focusing on your attitude. How are you conducting yourself? Are you proud? Are you humble? Are you respectful? Are you tolerant? And then if you're like that, then you can't be affected by anybody. You can't be angered by anybody. You can't be provoked into behaving in a way, in retaliating. Okay, so you've done this to me, therefore I'm okay to do that back to you. So Lord Chaitanya is saying, no. We don't want to behave like that, because then we just become like the person that we're behaving in the same way against, you see. Then the person that's behaving that way, there was a teacher, and the boy had been bullying somebody in the school. So the teacher went over to the boy, got him by the scruff of the neck and shook him really, really hard and said, I don't want to see you bullying anyone again. And so he went away, But all he taught the boy was, if you want to get things done, use violence. So he just confirmed what the boy had already thought in the first place. So that you have to show by compassion that this violent approach towards others is not going to work. It maybe worked in previous ages, but in Kali Yuga, because everyone is so infected and disqualified, mandasa mandamatio mandabhagiyupadruta, everyone is disturbed, everyone is unqualified, no one should be looking down on anybody else. We should all consider ourselves very fallen, and so that's the update. Humble state of mind.
It's interesting that in the purport, in the verse, there's like analysis there that in order to satisfy people in a different environments, you have to actually do a different thing for each environment that will satisfy them. You kind of just blanket, this is one thing that is going to satisfy everyone. There's going to be a different thing. For Shudras, it was nice food.
For the different classes of people, yeah.
So it shows that there is necessity for leaders to be sensitive to actually the psychophysical nature of the people to be able to satisfy it.
Yeah.
One person's food could be another person's body.
That's right, yeah. You've heard of that before? Varna? No. Varna is different. There's 4 basic different types of people. There's the person who likes to think, and then there's the person who likes to fight, and then the person who likes to make money, and then the person who likes to just kind of live a very basic, simple life, If he can eat something every day and have somewhere to sleep, he's happy with that. So that's considered the majority of people, Shudra. And in Kali Yuga, the age that we're in now, it's said that most people are Shudra, actually. But you don't have to stay Shudra. You may be born like that, but you can be trained to go into a different state of consciousness, and you can become a Brahmin if you take the proper training. So we're generally a work in progress. And we're trying to better ourselves and improve and become free from samskaras, which are impressions that are there in the mind, which make us behave in a certain way. And we're trying to become free from behaving in that way.
I'm just looking a little bit into Varnashram, and Prabhupada very much emphasized that the devotee, he doesn't belong to the environment, he's a Vaishnava. Is above these things. So you cannot even to call devotee a Shudra or whichever, it's actually insult, not the proper thing. However, he says to set an example for the society, how things can get organized, then a devotee would embrace one of those to show and act with that capacity.
Hmm.
So it's quite an interesting phenomenon. It's like simultaneous voice and difference against the devotee
Yeah.
Vaishnava that he will act in a certain capacity, a certain example.
And there's also a Daivivan ashram, isn't it? Where it's all translated, if it's all connected to Krishna, then everyone's considered. It's like the leg. There's the leg, the belly, the arm, and the head of the body. That's what society is made of. It's like a body, and there's all these different parts of the body. So you could say, well, that's just the leg. We'll chop it off. We don't really need it. So you chop the legs off. But it's not much fun going around with no legs. Whereas a person appreciates all the parts of the body and that they all have a function. And then if the body is engaged in transcendental activities, then the leg is as glorious as the head, because they're all engaged in doing something which is very spiritual and very beneficial. So then it's very useful. But then if you live in a society where it's headless, if you have a headless body running around, and it may be doing a really good dance, doing all kinds of amazing things, and you say, oh, look at that body over there with no head. It's building amazing things and doing amazing things, but it has no head. So at any minute it could run into a ditch, or run into a wall, or run into a... Generally, headless societies run into each other, and they start fighting with another body that doesn't have any head either. And they just, and they don't have a head to discuss and read, why are we fighting? There's no head there, so he punched him, so he's punching him, and they're not even really thinking about it. So that's what we have now. We have a lot of headless societies because the leadership isn't good. And if we create a society of leaders, then those leaders can then advise, because that was the old system. The kings would go to the Brahmins for advice, and they would say, I'm thinking of engaging in a war, like with Maharaj Gaya. So then the Brahmins would say, well, that's very good because it's on religious principles, and if you do that, it will protect the citizens, so this is very good. Or they'll say, no, this is not good, this is not a good idea.
It's interesting that in Bhagavatam we read that there's so many kings before they took up their position of leadership, they went to purification and sacrificing their life almost as a standard. So when you are in that position, you are not affected by temptations, by various types of aggrandizements, like Gaia. He didn't have any personal desire for himself. Everything he was doing as a service, and was able to care for the people.
Yeah.
Because of that.
Yeah.
So you can't expect good leadership in a modern day unless people purify their existence.
Yeah. So we shouldn't be too surprised, really, that things aren't going so well. In fact, we should be surprised that things are going at all. It's actually quite amazing that there's still fruit on the trees, and the weather is still reasonable. It's like having a clock, and you take the clock and you hit it around the room a few times with a sledgehammer, and you hang it on the wall, and it's still telling you the time, Although the mechanics are all kind of twisted and broken, but it's still trying to function. So the system has been abused and exploited to the point where the general masses now are finding it difficult to vote for anyone, to put their faith in anyone as a leader, because there's so much lying going on, so much deceit. People know they're being lied to. They know they're not being told the truth. The other problem as well is, are the people ready to accept the truth? If the leader has all these people that he's leading, and the people don't appreciate the truth, then he has to just choose which lie is going to be the best one to appeal to the most amount of people. So then you do have a real leader is someone that doesn't have who isn't afraid to stand up and say the truth. But to stand up and say the truth means you wouldn't be very popular in today's society. So it's how to be able to bring in some of the truth, and over a period of time, bring in more of the truth.
Also, it's a challenge as well for us as a spiritual society. If people come to us and they see the similar traits as in the material world, it's very difficult for them to reawaken their faith. So it's a very strong pressure personally on our own personal responsibility to actually give the real feeling of actually want to talk and purify our existence in a very strong sadhana and actually become free from those personal attachments so that you can reawaken people's faith. Otherwise, it's just going to be, you can't blame them, because they've been so abused and they come to us and they have a high degree of distrust. You have to awaken that trust in the real thing. Otherwise, it's just going to, people remain cynical and unfaithful.
Yeah, Mahabharata was saying he asked those devotees that are all enrolled on the forgiveness course. He said, "Does everyone here believe in karma?" And they said, "Yeah." Everyone said, "Yeah." He said, "So why is anybody here then?" Because if you believe in karma, then there's nothing to forgive, because you're just getting whatever it is you deserve. So there's a big gap between how we behave and how we should be behaving if we fully accept the philosophy. You see, it's a huge gap there, and that's because we've come from the educational system and background that we have, and these types of attitudes are entrenched. So how can we take what we read and put into our mind? How can we take that and put it into our heart so that it becomes something that we live rather than just something that we passively agree with, That is the challenge. Personally, from myself, when I first came into the association of devotees, I could see such a huge difference between people that I'd normally associated with, even though they weren't perfect and they weren't pure devotees, but still they were vastly beyond, it was the best to choose from out of what was on offer. So at least if we can be that, and if we can maintain that humility, then that safeguards us against behaving in a way which could be construed as, being arrogant and so keeping commitments is one of the best ways to build relationships, actually, and instill faith in people. If you tell somebody you're going to do something, then just do it, and that's a simple way to gain integrity. People think, I can trust that person. He keeps his word, It's a small thing, but it's a large deposit in the emotional bank account. And considering small things, just thinking about the person's welfare and being kind to the person, that goes a long way, actually. People join religious movements not so much because of the philosophy, but just because it's a place they go where people are nice to them, I mean, we have the highest philosophy, and that's nice, but let's at least just try and do the simple stuff like being nice, kind to people. And all the other elevated, deep philosophy and Siddhanta, that can come later, but let's not lose sight of doing the very initial courtesy, That will cultivate good relationships with people, and they will have respect and appreciation for us, and then things can progress nicely from there, you see. It's very hard for a humble person to offend anybody. And and they're very kind of remorseful if they've done anything which has upset somebody. So, but that's austere also. It's sincerity to be like that. But it's not easy. Giving up your false ego and defense is the strongest animalistic propensity to defend. We're always trying to defend ourselves. That wasn't fair. You shouldn't have said that. He did this to me. So that's like so second nature to defend ourselves. Or even first nature. Any last comments or questions? on the descendants of King Priyavrata. So the Varnashram system is to establish, okay, so you're like this and you're like that, so let's work together as a body. And Sangha is an interesting word because we know Anga is limb. Sadhu Sangha is to become a limb in the body of sadhus. So that's very intimate. It's like, okay, your arm is not your leg, but if you cut your leg, everyone's upset about it. Everyone's upset. So Sadhu Sangha is that we're so intimately connected as one body that we feel the pain of others and the upset of others, and we want to help them. You could say, well, it's just my leg. Don't worry about the leg. If it drops off, I don't care. I can just hop around. It's okay. You don't think like that because it's your body. So you're concerned if there's some problem with your leg. You're trying to help it. So that's what Varnashram system is supposed to be. What Daivi Varnashram system is supposed to be is that body is being used to serve Krishna. So we need all the parts of the body. We need to keep the parts healthy, happy, clean, looked after. And as a body, we thrive. As a society, we thrive. So that would mean not looking down on, someone's doing this service and someone's doing that service. They say it's harder to distribute 2 books than it is to distribute 100 books. So you could look down on the person that does 2 books. But that person that does 2 books could be much dearer to Krishna than the person that does 100 books, because the person that does the 2 books, it's so difficult for him to do that. And the person that's doing 100 books, it's easy for him to do it. He doesn't have to try very hard. So then the person that does 100 books could look down on the person that does 2 books. Who are you? So, Daivi Varnashram, a person may be a Shudra, he may not be able to read, he may not know how to say the Sanskrit very nicely, he may be like this, he may not know that. And then someone who does have knowledge could think, oh, he's such a dull person, he doesn't even know how to say Saridhara Vijaya properly, he's just such a space case. But he's maybe trying much harder to try and do those things than the person that finds it easy. So it's very important that we have appreciation. Instead of trying to judge people, try to understand people. It's much easier to judge than it is to understand. But, okay, you judge the person is guilty. Okay, so what's the punishment? Okay, punish him. Okay, and then, we end up with nobody still here. They all want to go away. Whereas if we understand people, then we can help them. Don't help the person by judging them. The person can become very discouraged if you judge them. Oh, you don't understand. It's so difficult for me. You just think, oh, you're just making some excuse. So that's not understanding. Iskon Guru Ki Jai, Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai, Nitai Gaura Premanandi Haribol. Gaura Bhakta Ki Jai.